Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 33 of the Strokecast. Before we get started today, I want to mention a couple of things that are going on, and this is, I suppose, some more timely information, which I generally try to avoid. But the American Heart Association is running fundraisers around the country this fall to raise money for research, heart health, and stroke awareness initiatives. They involve a series of walks or runs and other events. To find one in your area, go ahead and visit heartwalk.org. If your local one has already passed, go ahead and start planning for 2019. The Seattle Heart and Stroke Walk is scheduled for October 13th, 2018. I'll be there, so come say hi if you're in the area. Later in October, October 29th, is World Stroke Day. You can go to worldstrokecampaign.org for more details. So now's a great time to start thinking about how you might want to recognize World Stroke Day. Do you want to spend it celebrating survival of yourself or a loved one? Perhaps sharing warning signs with coworkers, relatives, and friends. Maybe it's a good day to double up on your PT exercises. Or rent a plane and do some skywriting. I want to hear about your plans. Go ahead and send an email to bill@strokecast.com, post a message at facebook.com/strokecast, or hit me up on Twitter where I am @currentlybill. So let's talk about today's guest, Lauren Sheehan. You may remember me talking about Olivia in the past. Olivia was one of my awesome OTs during my inpatient stay at Swedish Cherry Hill. You heard from her colleague, another one of my awesome OTs, Emily Mason, back in episode 20. You can go ahead and check out strokecast.com/Emily if you missed that one. So I stayed in touch after leaving the hospital, and Olivia emailed me one day about an interesting new item that they got in, and she wanted me to try it out. It involved petting a virtual cat, so I was so there. The product was Neofect's Rapael Smart Glove, a plastic exoskeleton that goes over your affected hand and senses the slightest movement. It hooks up to a tablet, so instead of just doing reps for OT, you actually play games, one of which involves the aforementioned cat. It was pretty cool, and I wanted to learn more, so Olivia introduced me to her former colleague, the now senior clinical manager at Neofect, Lauren Sheehan. Lauren got me a demo unit, and I've been playing with it at home a bit. I'll provide a more detailed review in a future episode. The things Lauren and Neofect are doing are really intriguing to me. It's about driving neuroplasticity through the use of technology that leverages the patient's own limited abilities and adapts as the patient gets stronger. Lauren has been a practicing occupational therapist for over 10 years. Her dream to join a technology company was realized when dreaming about the possibility of doing something outside the box after spending the last decade in outpatient neuroclinical practice and most recently in administration and management roles. Lauren has served in various roles on her state occupational therapy associations and is a proponent of being an active member, particularly in advocating for occupational therapy through legislation and contact with elected officials. She has enjoyed planning and organizing Washington State's Hike the Hill event for 3 years. She's also served as the AOTA Representative Assembly member for the state of Washington. Lauren believes that OT professionals are poised to be product designers, user experience experts, and consultants as it relates to technology solutions that meet the needs of individuals with disabilities. So now, let's meet Lauren. So Lauren, thank you so much for joining me on Strokecast this week. I think this is going to be really interesting.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, really excited to join you and tell you a little bit about my journey and how we're trying to use technology for good in stroke rehab.
That is awesome, and that really hits at some of the things that I just get really excited about, having worked in the technology industry since the mid 90s, and just loving gadgets and meaning that in the best possible way, and the potential of how this stuff can make a difference. But to get started, let's go back a little bit. And I always find it interesting how folks get to where they are. So why did you choose occupational therapy to begin with?
Gosh, that really takes me back.
All superhero movies begin with an origin story.
I first learned about OT as I was, doing my college search, and I always knew I wanted to do something in healthcare. I have been interested in science and neuroscience from a pretty young age. That's just always been fascinating to me. And when I heard about OT on one of my college visits, something just really clicked for me. And the idea of the art of understanding someone's personal meaning and what brings value to their life in terms of the things that they may want to return to or that they're working to get back to and restore function for after injury or illness, along with understanding how the brain works and neuroplasticity, and kind of combining those two things, the art and the science of assisting people and getting back to things that bring meaning to their lives. It just was a really natural fit for me. And strangely, I know this isn't everyone's story, but from that moment on, I knew that's what I wanted to do, and I didn't look back. So I've kind of early high school years had been on a path to become an OT, and it's been a wonderful career and continues to fascinate me and get me excited, and hopefully allows me to use my skills and my desire to help people in now a very different way than it was when I was working one-on-one with clients in the clinic, but still fascinating and really life-giving nonetheless. So that's how I got here.
I really find it interesting how you describe it as, referring to the art of somebody's life and their priorities. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you mean by that.
Sure. Everyone constructs their lives, of course, differently, and meaning to someone is going to look so different than, your neighbor. And so really trying to tap into sort of the qualitative experience of someone's life after, a brain injury or a stroke or spinal cord injury, which have really been the areas of practice that I've worked in helping people recover from neurologic challenges. The things that are important to someone and wanting to spend their time rehabbing those particular areas is so individual. And so I think the art for me is trying to figure out, how to therapeutically use myself and my line of questioning and listening and understanding what those priorities are before developing a plan for rehab. And that just keeps it so interesting for me as an OT, and hopefully in therapy as well. Motivation really is derived from meaning. And if something is meaningful, it's a lot easier to be excited about making gains or seeing improvements. And so just trying to use that meaning making. We're as humans very, very much meaning making machines. And so trying to tap into that, both for motivational purposes, but then also to help restore function in areas that are really important. I remember a patient, actually, the individual that sort of brought me to Neofect, but they mentioned that, so much of their inpatient rehab stay was focused on things like dressing. And I remember really distinctly this patient's wife saying, that's something that I was willing to help with. I would have rather seen our time in therapy spent on, improving motor function in, my husband's arm, because that's something that I don't feel as skilled to do. So really, not using kind of a one size fits all approach to therapy and listening to people in terms of what really is most important to them in that moment, I think is the art behind occupational therapy for me.
Interestingly enough, I was just on Facebook Live yesterday talking about, just what it means to have goals. And I think as an inpatient in my very first days in inpatient rehab, one of the things that the team was asking me about was, what are my goals? And at the time, it was sort of really difficult for me to articulate anything beyond, well, I want to get back to where I was. And
Sure.
And that's not a great goal. It's not necessarily simple, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound in that same way, that the idea of looking at SMART goals. And I think that's really interesting when you start talking about, what is meaning in a person's life and how that ties in terms of, how they are able to articulate that now. And I think now when I look at, revising goals, at the time, I probably should have said something like world domination, but just simple. Yeah. Exactly. But now I define things among my current goals with OT is to get back to the point where I can type with two hands, and something like that becomes a little bit more specific to an individual. As an occupational therapist, you made your own occupational shift from clinical practice and working with some of the awesome people over at Swedish Cherry Hill to essentially a sales and marketing role, some of them which are their own form of a very honorable profession. And as a sales and marketing professional, I certainly appreciate that. But, it's interesting to see that shift in choice. And what drove that choice to bring you from there over to Neofect?
Sure. I will say, and it's kind of a sensitive dance in terms of what my role looks like. My title, although in a startup that doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot,
right.
It is senior clinical manager. So what I am sort of charged with is really understanding the science behind our products, supporting research, and then informing our sales and marketing teams in terms of the messaging, and also, looking for other opportunities, maybe new populations to introduce products to. I do some work with product design and feedback. I am pretty involved in the marketing side in terms of creating content and creating tutorials and ways to support clinicians in using the products as well. So I see myself as sort of a supportive role to all of the other areas of business, with hopefully, always very much a clinical hat on. It's multifaceted, so it's hard to define specifically. But the way that I got connected to this role, and so interestingly, I was talking with a friend the other day. Technology changing as much as it has in the rehab field in the last number of years. My role, or a role like this, wouldn't have even been possible a handful of years ago. So I never, didn't necessarily see myself going in this direction, but it's been a really good fit. And the way I got introduced to Neofect was actually through a client that I was working with. Had spent a little bit of time doing some neuro private practice work, and was working with a gentleman who himself was a game programmer by training and background. And he and his wife found the device, found the Rapael Smart Glove in some of their searches for a home rehab tool for him. Just seeing the way that he connected with it in terms of motivation. And of course, gaming was a big part of his occupations and his background. And so he had some great feedback about the product and, some ideas for product improvement. And when you come from that background, it's hard not to kind of approach, a piece of technology with that lens. So we just had a lot of fun, using it for a rehab tool for him, but also looking at ways that it could potentially be improved. And at the time, Neofect didn't have anyone clinical on their US team. So, through conversation and relationship building over some months and maybe even closer to a year, I decided to come on board and move to the Bay Area in order to pursue this sort of really unique opportunity to use my skills, which, I think I've done some management and administration work in the past. And it was tough to be within the kind of layers of a hospital system in terms of bureaucracy and other red tape. Things just move more slowly in that environment as far as change is concerned. And my pace is a bit faster the technology field and startup world are just a better fit for me that way. And my impact is different now than it was working with individual clients. I do some of that as well. We onboard all of our new clients with our devices on an online video visit. So we do provide that one-on-one sort of coaching, which is pretty unique, but I also get to inform how the product changes and how we reach people, which is a larger impact in my eyes. And I really enjoy that.
That is a really fascinating field. And that is a lot of the really fun stuff too, in having an impact and going out there and working across the different parts of an organization and even to the extent of doing the onboarding. It's actually a large part of what I was doing when I was running training over at Toshiba. Was everything from feedback to the development folks to the to going out and teaching folks about the product, to going out and doing rollouts of laptop computers at schools and other initiatives like that. And it's interesting how all those different roles sort of come together to really give you an opportunity to change the world in a different way. We've mentioned the Smart Glove, and I've had a chance to play with it and start using it a little bit, and I really like the idea behind it. So I guess, can we start off with, so what is the Smart Glove?
It's the product that really helped kind of launch our company. And it's a biofeedback training tool that, it's a glove that's worn, and it interfaces with our Rapael home software to allow the user to basically use their hand, wrist, and forearm motions as a controller for these engaging training games. Many of the training activities have kind of an activities of daily living focus. Some of them are games for the sake of games, but we try and include things that are, that kind of meaning, that bridge to meaning for people that are trying to get back to a particular activity. For example, there's there are about 40 training games currently on the platform, on the software for the Smart Glove. But one example is a fishing game. So using the wrist motion, and it uses whatever movement, a user has, which can be pretty slight. It really only has to be visible. So it can just be a very slight movement, but it uses that movement as the training window to get a high intensity, high repetition program in a short amount of time. So for that fishing game, the wrist motion is used to cast the fishing pole and to, pull up the fish or any other number of things that are hiding in the water. If you've played that one, there's some funky things that come up, spatula, pearls. It translates the user's motion into this virtual reality world where a small amount of movement is sort of magnified so that we can really drive repetition, which is the big component for motor relearning and remapping the brain.
Absolutely. And I know one of the games, one of the ones that jumped out at me was, you get to pet a virtual cat. And
there's some cool stuff.
This is the we're on the internet, so it's about the cats.
I know.
And
there's all sorts of things.
Yeah, some fun stuff. And the glove itself is basically, it's sort of like this little plastic exoskeleton that goes on the back of your hand and actually is able to sort of sense the movement of each individual finger, the wrist, the hand, all of that fun stuff. And it doesn't really weigh anything significant. So it's really a very interesting idea. One of the things that strikes me about it is a topic that we've encountered a lot in learning and development, in training, the corporate training field, and we see it in a bunch of other fields as well that are focused on user engagement, and that is the concept of gamification. Mm-hmm. And that's really what this is. It's about applying games and scores to activities. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you see the role of gamification changing stroke recovery.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and you can attest to this too, Bill, in your own, recovery journey, but it's so challenging for folks to see measurable progress and to remain motivated over, the long haul. I've had so many people in my own time as a clinician reflect back to me that, gosh, I didn't realize it was such a marathon to work on this recovery. And, we're seeing neuroscience is telling us more and more about the possibility for improvement years and years after the initial insult or injury. So we know that improvement and gains are possible long term, but it's such a challenge for someone to stay motivated in order to continue the intensive program and get the repetitions in that are responsible for improvement and function. And so I think the role of gamification is really as a motivator. And it's been so much fun to see how people are motivated by, beating their own scores or in the case of our software, there are a number of repetitions that are assigned by, we have an algorithm and sort of artificial intelligence that helps to drive a user's program over time. And so as they improve, they need to perform more repetitions. They gather or earn stars based on the repetitions that they complete in a certain time frame, and then those stars translate to certain medals, bronze, silver, or gold for each of their sessions. And so, I think the gamification piece is a huge motivator. I would love to see, and I think the direction that rehab technology and gamification is going is the opportunities to interact in a community type setting with other individuals who are working on similar types of improvement. So having a platform where you could sort of play against or add your scores from a certain facility, like a facility challenge. So if Swedish had a number of people using the Smart Glove and a hospital down the street also had the same thing, being able to use kind of composite scores to motivate even groups of people or within sort of teams. We saw this when the Fitbit came about, motivation and having goals, like you mentioned, having kind of these measurable benchmarks with the game support to keep it interesting and engaging really does drive behavior. And so I think we'll continue to see as technology, makes a way for these opportunities, more and more virtual reality as kind of a platform or an intervention and games to keep people motivated over the long term of their stroke or brain injury recovery. I think it's just the beginning, really, of how that will be used to drive improvement and engagement over the long term.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the Fitbit. For those who don't know, it is basically it is a smart pedometer. So what it does is it tracks how many steps that you take in a given day, and it tracks how well you sleep at night. And when Fitbit came out, I want to say it was a good 8 to 10 years ago now.
It's been a while.
It really has. Pedometers were really just sort of the province of athletes, and they were mechanical and more clunky. And the Fitbit was just this really small thing that slipped into your pocket so anybody could easily start tracking their steps. And as the idea of getting 10,000 steps a day came into public consciousness, that really was driven and brought to public awareness by the little Fitbit product. And now they have a variety of other things. And what's really interesting is that trend then caught the public consciousness in such a way that now we saw an explosion of other smart devices to track steps for non-athletes and to track fitness. And now it's an idea and it's a technology that's incorporated also into the latest iPhone, looking at how it counts steps and all of this other stuff. So once you give people a score they can try to beat, that becomes really interesting. And it's a number on a website or on an application. It's really just it comes down to a graphic on the screen. It's a little thing that, if you break it down, it's just a really stupid little thing. It's just a number. Right. And it's amazing how powerfully motivating that is. And, if it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid. It gets people moving. It gets people doing things. And if it gets people going back and doing more reps, that is just fantastic.
I'm curious to see, I had the great pleasure of being able to attend the Consumer Electronics Show this year, and wearable technology and digital technology for health are just really exploding. So it'll be so curious to see how things are integrated in the future. There were just some really neat clothing sensors and other things tracking anywhere from respiration rate and heart rate, just some really interesting tools that I think will continue to make their way into more of the mainstream and to be utilized in the rehabilitation field. I think there's great opportunity there. And yeah, you're right. I mean, the motivation, it seems silly, but seeing it firsthand and how people are so driven by their scores and earning these medals and things, there's real teeth to game theory and gamification. It's a real motivating factor.
Absolutely. I didn't do CES the past 2 years, but I've done it many times in the past. And that show itself is a behemoth, and the scale of what you're seeing in those types of devices is just incredible. And there's still so much growth to happen in that industry. And when you talk about smart clothing, that becomes a really interesting way where you start to see some more of these things become possible. And I think it is also incumbent on those of us with disabilities that, whether we are in a position of hopefully in a number of years not having that disability anymore, or if it is going to be around regardless, it's incumbent of us to say to the industry, this doesn't work for us. And how can this be different? Absolutely.
And I've found, of course, encountering them and seeing the potential for the rehab market and to serve people with disabilities or different abilities, often the industry is open to that feedback. They've just potentially never received it before. And so I do completely and wholeheartedly support, that voice of folks for whom these products are clunky or could be improved, to really speak up, because I think technology, that the industry has been open in my experience. They just don't necessarily see the applications that we're seeing, understanding rehab and some of the ways that these technologies can be used by individuals that have, different abilities than kind of the mass market. So I really support giving that product feedback. And we always are looking for it. We're always tapping our users for ways that accessibility can be improved. And I know, Bill, you're helping to give some feedback just from your own perspective. We're always looking to have that product feedback. Whether we can do something about it immediately is another story, but we are always open and looking for those things. And I think that's true of many of the different technology companies. So do speak up. I think that's a really great message.
Absolutely. The organizations are generally happy to have the conversation or to start the conversation. And yeah, I think that's what a lot of folks in the community really want, is to be a part of that conversation. And
I completely agree. And it's fun. I mean, it's fun to be able to know that your feedback is hopefully going to, again, create impact for a larger number of folks.
Absolutely. So when you're talking about impact for folks, what's been, sort of the most exciting result you've seen so far from the Smart Glove?
Oh, it's always fun to hear from our users. I was having a conversation just recently with an individual that's using the Smart Glove. She, well, gosh, I have so many stories. This particular one comes to mind, though, just because I had a recent conversation. This gal had a brain injury when she was 7, I believe. And again, talking about motivation, she spent a number of years really kind of going hard with therapy and an adolescent, and then sort of dropped off, was able to do a lot of things in spite of her affected side, and really worked around some of the functional challenges that she was having, but then decided that she wanted to get into a career that made it necessary for her to do networking. Actually, she wanted to go into a marketing field of some sort. Speaking of your background.
So networking in the context of meeting people and working with people, not in terms of transporting data across.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. And so she started to realize her discomfort and her sensitivity around shaking someone's hand because she's affected on the right side. And so she got a hold of the Smart Glove and started using it. And within a month, just had so much positive energy and improvements that she had seen that she contacted us. And so I reached out to have a one-on-one conversation. Interestingly, the improvement in her motion just after 1 month of intensive training had improved her confidence to be able to do some of these networking events and meet people and start applying for jobs. But the impetus really was around how she was seen by some of these potential employers based on that kind of physical approach or interaction with the handshake. And so she, reported that her confidence had improved. She has started to use her affected side more naturally in her everyday life, which is really what we hope for. That intensive training kind of breaks up this learned non-use that so many folks end up sort of going through when the abilities of that affected side are not maybe functional enough to engage in some of the things that they do in their everyday life. And so it's really easy to kind of stop using it altogether. So she talks about, using it to do the dishes, that both hands are involved, that she's more naturally reaching out to, grab a cup or something in her environment. But the thing that really did strike me the most was this idea around perception and handshaking and confidence. And I think, as someone who doesn't deal with that myself on a daily basis, realizing the impact can be much more than just interacting with the physical environment and function, but really confidence, perception, and for her, the potential of having more confidence to go into these interview situations. So a pretty neat story. And she was really jazzed about the improvement that she had seen in such a short time.
That is really cool. And that is because the effect and the impact is about so much more than just what the fingers do. It's about what we do with our lives. And,
exactly.
And that's sort of, I guess, ultimately what occupational therapy is about. It's not about the fingers. It's about living the life that you want to live.
Absolutely. And it was just a great reminder for me about, the magnitude of the impact on someone's life and that confidence factor. So really exciting. I mean, we have got several stories. Often what I hear from folks is just that they haven't had something, even if they've remained motivated, years after a stroke or brain injury, to see improvements in their affected side. They just haven't had kind of the right tool for the job, something that allows them to remain engaged with the gamification component, have sort of a start and end point with, these sessions of a particular number of activities, being able to sit down and do, the program, which helps advance them as they improve. Often folks leave the outpatient clinic, with pieces of paper and trying to figure out what to do at what time for how long and how to advance a program is really difficult when someone doesn't have clinical support kind of in the long term. So I think that's the exciting piece about the Smart Glove and Smart Board is that, they really help provide that guidance that isn't typically available therapy doesn't last forever, unfortunately. So it's hard to stay engaged and see improvements and kind of know where to go with your rehab, which I think is one of the ways that we help to provide a solution for that.
So what do you think is one of the most important things for other therapists to know about sort of this field going forward?
Yeah, my 2 cents is, I think there are some skeptics in the world of rehab in terms of the place of technology. And it depends, of course, on, how long someone's been practicing and what they've been exposed to. But I think when harnessed and when provided, with opportunities to move, technology shouldn't be scary. It can be a little cumbersome to learn a new piece of technology, but I would just encourage therapists not to stop them from kind of counting it out as a possibility or as an option for an intervention. And of course, none of these things stand alone. There will always be a place for all of the great ways that we as therapists do, different handling techniques and use different approaches to neuro rehab. And it's possible to incorporate some of those great strategies into using a piece of technology. It's really just one tool in our toolkit, but if it can help motivate, our patients to continue with their rehab journey, particularly after sort of formal therapy is done. And that's a lot shorter time frame than some people give it credit for. I think, what happens with, folks like yourself when there's no more outpatient therapy. And I just don't think we're doing as good enough a job setting people up for long-term success, and using technology as one way to keep them motivated, engaged, measuring their progress. And I think it's part of our charge as therapists, not only when someone is in front of us, do we want to help them live their best life? And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. And I think technology is a possible way to stay connected and keep people connected to their rehab in the long term.
Very cool. It's about, sort of finding the right solution for the right person.
Exactly.
To keep them going. And especially in the U.S. market with the limitations on what insurance companies will pay for therapy and the time frames and all of that other stuff, it's also really interesting. I also think it's also potentially interesting too how a tool like this in even an inpatient context where continuing to show improvement is important for the continued availability of insurance reimbursement, where a company is not going to continue to pay for more therapy if the patient is not making quantifiable progress. And being able to offer a quantifiable number, well, that's a little redundant, but an actual quantifiable score to show progress over the course of a week or 2 weeks or a month, as opposed to just a subjective interpretation of a therapist, which is of course invaluable in and of itself, and definitely accurate. But I think some folks companies are more likely to respond better to a data-based score, which can help out in that perspective. So if folks want to learn more about the product, where should they go? So if folks want to know more about the product, where should they go?
Yeah, we have a website where we, collect information. We do have a 7-day trial on any of our products. So essentially you can come on board. You do pay upfront, but then you are met with one of our wonderful OTs, myself included, to do an onboarding session. And you have 7 days to really determine whether or not the product is a good fit. And we want it to be a good fit for you as well. You mentioned the right tool for kind of the right person and at the right time. I think all of those pieces are really important. So folks can go to Rapael Home, RAPAEL, home.com. That has a number of different videos, some testimonials, information about all of our smart rehab products. and a place to leave information so that our customer experience team can reach out. I will mention, because I think sometimes it's not well known, as training devices, so as hand and arm rehab tools, none of our products require a physician referral, so folks can come to us directly. Unfortunately, with the limitations of insurance, it is challenging to get these products paid for by insurance. We have a great relationship with the VA, so the VA does cover our rehab devices for veterans, and we're continuing to work on reimbursement for the other devices. But we do try and make them accessible from a cost standpoint, and the clinical support that's a part of the program, I think, is different than what any other technology company is currently doing.
Well, that is fantastic. And a number of hospitals are actually using it inpatient as well. So it's entirely something that your outpatient or inpatient clinic may have access to as well if you wanted to try it out in that context.
Absolutely. And we also provide trials for facilities. So if you are going, to therapy in a location that doesn't have our smart rehab products, getting in touch with us via our info@neofect.com email, we can get in contact with your facility, your rehab facility, and potentially, set up a trial so that you could try it with your therapist as another option in terms of accessing the technology to try it out.
Awesome. And we'll also have all of those links available over at strokecast.com/smartglove.
Excellent.
And
thanks so much for your time, Bill.
You're welcome. And if folks want to know more about you and what you're up to, where should they go?
I am on LinkedIn and often posting, new things about what we have going on with Neofect. We also have a presence on Facebook, both Rapael Home and Neofect. And we have some new products launching. We have actually a robotic device, a robotic hand device that will assist with grasp. And that is going to be launched through a Kickstarter starting in October. So check that out. It's on our website as well. Lots of exciting developments happening, and with the goal of providing hope for continued recovery after stroke and neurologic injury. So we're excited to get the word out about what we're up to and reach out if we can do anything to help in your own rehab journey.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. This has been fantastic.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bill. And thanks for all the work that you're doing to inform folks that are in similar situation. I love that you're getting the word out and sharing your own story, and looking forward to seeing what you do.
And that brings us to our hack of the week. Aprons. You see, I am starting fashion trends all over the place because that is just what I do. Ask anybody and none of them will tell you that I am fashionable because I am so fashion forward. I am ahead of all of these trends. And the latest trend I'm bringing forward is aprons. You see, hemiparesis means that I lost the use of pockets on the left side of my body. I simply can't easily reach the pockets in my pants over there. And of course, I know many of the women listening are probably thinking, well, at least you had the use of pockets for most of your life. And yes, that's true, but I want them back. You see, carrying stuff like little things is challenging. Between stairs and handrails and holding a cane and realizing I left my bag in another room, it can be difficult to hold stuff and to put stuff in pockets that I can't reach. So I recently started wearing an apron that has big pockets on the front. Now I can stash my tablet, my thermal coffee mug, my bullet journal, my phone, and more right in the pockets on my apron. And it easily goes with me, and I drop less food on my shirt too. So it's a winning solution. If you find yourself struggling with carrying stuff around your home, consider adding an apron with pockets to your wardrobe. Plus, tying those apron strings doubles as occupational therapy. So what did you think of today's episode and the idea of gamification? Let us know over at strokecast.com/smartglove. Do you have plans for World Stroke Day? I'd love to hear them. Go ahead and email me, bill@strokecast.com, or leave a message on facebook.com/strokecast, or hit me up on Twitter where I am @currentlybill. Be sure to share this episode with your therapist, friend, colleague, or Uber driver by telling them to visit strokecast.com/smartglove. Be sure to subscribe to Strokecast for free in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. And of course, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you next week.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.